Hey, New. Hey, Manny. How are you guys doing today? We're going to start it at like 10:15. I figured it out. Good. My day was good. How was your day? This is going to be a really good one. I don't know if I've seen a couple of people comment that they enjoy Atlantis. So this is a really good episode. I won't lie. I did see this episode before, but I haven't seen the episode 2. I lined 2 up today. So if you want to stay for both, that's totally fine. Can everybody, you can hear me? Okay, you guys want to start? Yes, okay. Okay, tell me if you hear. We're going to start with the Thoth and Oops. 1 second. Let's get this started. Can you hear that? I know you. 1 second. I've got to get my video. One sec, guys. How is everybody tonight, by the way? Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
The older texts.
Can you see the screen? No, okay. Perfect. Okay, we are working things out, guys. We are getting it together. Okay, so this first episode, the Atlantis, Thoth, the Emerald Tablets. If you are familiar, you're in for a treat. If you are not familiar with this, you're also in for a great treat. And it's a great story. Yesterday's, I hadn't watched it first, to be honest, and I thought yesterday's was kind of so-so, but yeah, Atlantis is phenomenal. So let's get right to starting this. We're going to start at 10:10. So I'll give it 2 more minutes. Let me just make this a little bigger. Did it freeze? Seems. Okay, hold on. Okay, you ready? Let's get it.
Which would you prefer, eternal life or unlimited wealth? How about both? For that, you need the Philosopher's Stone, a substance that can turn base metals into gold and grant you eternal life. The Book of Aquarius contains the instructions for the Philosopher's Stone. Now, although the process can take years, the ingredients are simple. You have them in your home right now. But the Book of Aquarius is derived from many older texts, including one very mysterious artifact, the Emerald Tablet, which contains not only the...
So I was given a very good tip today from the New to You store. And this was Manny that gave me this tip. But to pause the video whenever I'm responding to a question or whenever I want to say something so that you guys can hear me clearly. Can you hear very well? Before I start? Okay, perfect. Okay, let's go.
The recipe for immortality, but the secret to everything in the universe. This knowledge has been around for centuries, but has been suppressed until now. Medieval alchemists received this knowledge from the Arabs 1,000 years ago. The Arabs got it from the Egyptians 2,000 years before that. But the Egyptians received this knowledge 36,000 years ago from the most advanced culture on Earth. The Emerald Tablet comes from Atlantis. For hundreds of years, the recipe for the Philosopher's Stone was the most sought-after secret of alchemy. According to legend, this substance could turn ordinary metal like lead and iron into gold. The Philosopher's Stone was also called the Elixir of Life because it could restore youth and even grant immortality. For centuries, alchemists attempted to create the stone, breaking down, distilling, and combining different materials in pursuit of this goal. This actually led to the creation of chemistry. Now, this might sound like hocus pocus, but some of the most brilliant minds in history believed in the Philosopher's Stone and dedicated a large portion of their lives in pursuit of it. Some became so infatuated that it drove them to the brink of insanity. Isaac Newton is remembered for his contributions to mathematics, astronomy.
Me too, Manny. I'm really excited. I love Atlantis, those Emerald Tablets, all that great content.
And physics, but he was also interested in alchemy. Newton spent the last 30 years of his life obsessed with the Philosopher's Stone. He even made his own translations of the Emerald Tablet, which are still studied today. Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II brought the best alchemists in Europe to court. Men like John Dee and Edward Kelly were given a private lab and an unlimited budget. At the beginning of the Renaissance, there was an alchemist who, as the legend goes, actually discovered the Philosopher's Stone, and his name was Nicholas Flamel. Now
he gave it to Dumbledore.
What?
Well, he actually puts it in Gringotts Vault, and then Hagrid fetched it for him.
Now, I don't think that's...
But Voldemort wants it, because he's stuck in the back of Quirrell's head, right? Then Hermione gets them past the Devil's Snare, and then Ron plays whiz chess. By the way, he used the Nimzowitsch defense as an opening gambit. You don't see that much with wizard's chess.
Now, if you believe in the legend or Harry Potter, Nicholas Flamel didn't die in 1418. He succeeded in...
Yes, the fish, Hecklefish definitely adds a nice little touch to this channel. This is a phenomenal channel, by the way. This is called The Y-Files, and I've been watching this guy for probably about 2 years now, and really cool narration of the story. He puts a lot of effort into his channel.
creating the Philosopher's Stone. And he and his wife Perenelle are still alive and out there somewhere.
Whoa, 600 years is a long time to be married.
I guess it is.
A long time.
Mm-hmm.
So very long. A long time.
Ever since man realized that his life was finite, the human race has been fascinated with the idea of extending their lifespan or even achieving immortality. The legend of the Fountain of Youth has been around for hundreds of years, and now we have cryonics, which is freezing a body at the moment of death in the hope of reviving them at some point in the future.
Wouldn't that be insane?
Or mind uploading, which will transfer a person's consciousness to a computer and then at some point transfer that consciousness back into a human or part human, part robot body. But it all started with the Emerald Tablet, written.
Have any of you ever heard of the Emerald Tablet? Or is this the first time you're actually hearing of it? Or maybe you've heard of it, but you've never actually dove into the information?
By the Egyptian god Jehudi, more commonly known as Thoth. Thoth was one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt. He was worshipped before the age of the pharaohs, so before 5000 BC. Thoth was the god of magic, wisdom, and the...
Good. Do you know anything about Egypt, or is this like new for you? I know you're all about Egypt. You're saying the new to you store.
moon. He was usually depicted as a man with the head of an ibis.
IBS?
Ibis.
What I say?
Yes.
Thoth created writing and hieroglyphics. He wrote the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The Egyptians claimed he invented science, religion, philosophy, and, of course, alchemy. Greeks call him the inventor of astronomy, mathematics, civilized government, and the alphabet.
Kind of an overachiever, this Egyptian, eh?
Well, that's what's interesting. Thoth wasn't actually a god. He wasn't even Egyptian. He arrived in Egypt many thousands of years ago, and he brought with him knowledge and wisdom from his own country.
Which is?
Thoth is from Atlantis.
Yahtzee!
Plato described Atlantis as being divided into 10 kingdoms, each with its own government, its own rulers, and its own purpose. One of these kingdoms was the island of Undal, which was the Atlantean center of philosophy and science. Thoth was born 36,000 years ago on Undal in the city of Keora. Keora was a community of scholars, scientists, and priests. Thoth was trained by his father, Thotme, who was a very important figure in Atlantis. Thotme was one of the children of light, who were...
Yes, that's the Rick structure from that they found in Africa.
An advanced race that lived alongside humans. The children of light provided the human race with science, language, and eventually technology. Some have said these beings were extraterrestrials, or the Anunnaki, or both. Though
Has anyone here heard of the Anunnaki? Or do you believe in it? Or do you think it's a myth? What's your take on that?
children of light weren't gods, they would appear godlike to any normal human. These are mortal beings. They're born and they die, just like we do.
Whoa. But if he could die, how was he in Atlantis 36,000 years ago and in Egypt 5,000 years ago?
I'm getting to it.
Sorry. Go ahead. I like this story.
I thought you would. Anyway, Thoth's father, Thotme, was the keeper of the Great Temple, which means he was a high priest who carried messages to the human race from the children of light.
Wise were we with the wisdom of the children of the light who dwell among us. Strong were we with the power drawn from the eternal fire. And of all these, greatest among the children of men was my father, Thotme, keeper of the great temple, link between the children of light within the temple and the races of men who inhabited the 10 islands.
The 10 kingdoms of Atlantis were created by an entity named Horlet, sometimes called the Dweller. And Thoth spent many years with the Dweller learning the art of wisdom. Thoth excelled in his studies and was finally invited to the halls of Amenti. It's there where Thoth is given the key to life, immortality. And he, like the other children of light, can reincarnate every 100 years. Now, as an immortal, Thoth is responsible for keeping the ancient knowledge that he's been taught. Then, a great flood destroys Atlantis.
Well, how long ago was that?
13,000 years ago.
Oh, and when was the younger drop?
I would like to see that new to you store. Maybe you can share a post with me.
Yes.
13,000 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Yet another flood myth takes place during a period of time known as the Younger Dryas. Every culture on Earth has the same flood myth. Anyway, in order to preserve the knowledge and culture of Atlantis, Thoth is one of the teachers sent out to establish new colonies around the world. One of these colonies is in South America. Another is in Central America. Thoth travels to a land the Atlanteans call Kem, but we know it as Egypt. Thoth took with him a tablet carved out of green emerald, though some believe it might have been crystal. Others say the tablet was made of orichalcum, a valuable ancient metal that, according to Plato, was mined in Atlantis. On this emerald tablet, Thoth wrote the secrets of the universe, including the key to immortality. This knowledge would become the foundation for ancient Egyptian alchemy. Now, for centuries, Thoth would reincarnate into different bodies, sharing his wisdom with a select few. Usually, he was born in Egypt, but sometimes his mission would take him to other parts of the world. And that takes us to ancient Greece, where the Emerald Tablet makes its first appearance.
And the Emerald Tablet did make its first appearance in Greece, which is kind of crazy because if you do study history, then you know that a lot of what we're doing today, our calendar, the fact that a year is 365 days and 12 months, all of this was created, and a lot of it started in Greece.
The Emerald Tablet, also known as Tabulus Margidina in Latin, is only 24 stanzas of text, but hidden within those few stanzas is the secret to immortality. The tablet is said to have been written by Hermes Trismegistus, who some say
Trismegistus
is a combination of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god, or is a reincarnation of Thoth himself. Hermes Trismegistus is the author of a group of texts called the Hermetica, and from these we get Hermeticism, a set of spiritual concepts and practices characterized by a belief in the unity of all things in the universe. Hermeticism has influenced secret societies like the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and the Order of the Black Sun. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is a secret society that emerged in the late 19th century. They used Hermetic principles in their ceremonies, which were said to be magic. The order also drew on other esoteric traditions, including Kabbalah and Tarot. The earliest known mention of the Emerald Tablet comes from an Arabic text dated 1200 years ago. But this text claims to be a translation of a much older work, which is possibly a translation of an even older text. Upon discovery, the Emerald Tablet became one of the most studied documents by Islamic and European alchemists. It also became popular with occultists who often use
I'm glad you like it, Manny.
the motto, as above, so below, which
As above, so below. As above, so below.
is the second verse of the tablet. But these were all just translations.
Funny that that same line's in the Bible today.
The original tablet was lost. Then, sometime in the 1st century AD, the philosopher Apollonius of Tyana was studying in the city's library when he came across a mysterious book. It was bound in green leather, and its pages were made of a material that he had never seen before. The book was written in a language that he didn't recognize, and its pages were filled with strange symbols and diagrams.
Right.
Apollonius studied the book and realized that it was a book of alchemy, filled with the secrets of the universe and the hidden forces of nature. Determined to uncover the mysteries of the book, Apollonius set out on a quest to find its author. After a long search, he came to a remote temple in the mountains where he met an oracle who told him where to look for answers. Apollonius was given directions to a secret cave underneath the statue of Hermes in Tyana. At the end of a dark, winding passage, Apollonius found the corpse of Hermes Trismegistus sitting on a golden throne. Still clutched in his withered skeletal fingers, Hermes had a dusty book and a tablet carved from a single piece of translucent green stone. Apollonius took the Emerald Tablet and the book and sealed the cave. He then incorporated these newfound secrets of alchemy into his own work. But then the Emerald Tablet was lost again.
Again, it's lost. How tiny was this thing?
Well, it was pretty big, almost 4 feet long and about 3 feet wide.
All that wisdom, and they can't keep track of a giant stone tablet, eh? Everyone who touches it suddenly comes down with a case of the Butterfingers.
It would seem so. Apollonius wrote that he gave the tablet to the Roman Emperor Hadrian, who buried it under his palace. But
One thing to note, too, is a lot of these stories that go back in history, a lot of them have real identified people in them, just like the Bible has identified people in it. And today, a lot of people will try to tell you that these, people were so bored, they were just creating stories. But, pay attention.
Some think the tablet was in the Library of Alexandria when it burned, or was taken by the
And the Library of Alexandria is real.
Knights Templar, or it's in the Vatican secret archives. It's been said to have ended up at just about every mysterious place on Earth. But in 1925, a man named Dr. Maurice Doreal had an idea. The early stories of the Egyptian god Thoth talk of him building the Great Pyramid of Giza as a way to protect an ancient artifact. So Dr. Doreal went to Egypt and explored the area where he thought the Emerald Tablet might be.
Oh, did he find it?
Not exactly.
Oh.
He found all 10. The tablets Doreal found were...
And just for context, this guy goes over at the end of each episode whether he is debunking or proving anything, or whether he believes what the story is or not. He actually explains it in the end of each episode.
In the possession of a mysterious group called the Great White Brotherhood. They wouldn't allow Doreal to take the tablets, but they did let him translate them. A few years later, in 1939, Dr. Doreal published his translation as a book, The Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. His translation confirmed the tablets were indeed written by Thoth. Doreal went on to found the Brotherhood of the White Temple, a religion that still exists and has a following. And one of the main themes of the book and of the Brotherhood of the White Temple is the concept of the one thing. The one thing is described as the source of all creation and the ultimate reality behind the physical world. It's said to be an energy that permeates all things and is the essence of all life.
The Force is what gives a Jedi his powers. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
We did a Star Wars bit last week. We can't go back to that well so soon.
Yeah, it was worth a shot.
Well, the book also describes ancient technologies and hidden knowledge. It suggests that ancient civilizations had advanced technologies and knowledge that have been lost over time.
We know that to be true because we still don't understand how the pyramids were built.
For example, the book describes a device called the Firestone, which is said to have the power to generate energy and manipulate matter. The book claims this technology was used by ancient civilizations, including the Atlanteans, but it's being... But a large part of the book covers alchemy, specifically transforming base into gold, curing illness, granting immortality, and achieving enlightenment. But like the original Emerald Tablet, it was all allegory and symbolism, subject to many different interpretations. There are no clear instructions. The tablet doesn't tell us what kind of materials we need to create the Philosopher's Stone. And even if they did, they don't tell us the process. But on March 11th, 2011, a mysterious book suddenly...
Very good point. The pyramids, a lot of the structures in Egypt in general, we don't understand how massive they are, but the width of the bottom of the pyramid is as long as an entire street. It's bigger than you can fathom. You kind of have to go there to see it.
Suddenly appeared online. It was called The Book of Aquarius, and this is what was written on the first page. The age of secrets is over. There's no need for mystical language or metaphor. This book contains no hidden meaning or codes. Everything is stated plainly and directly.
So what the hell does this mean?
Well, this means that anyone who wanted to create the Philosopher's Stone now has a recipe to follow, just like a cookbook. The Book of Aquarius looked legit. It's 165 pages and references 49 different alchemical texts that span 1,000 years. It's a long, difficult process, but anyone with the time and patience could do it. And some people did. And what's most amazing about the recipe for the Philosopher's Stone is that it's only one ingredient, and we all have it in us.
Oh, in us? What are you talking about? Well, what's the one ingredient we need to live forever?
Well, the one ingredient is,
What?
urine.
Oh, come on!
Some of the greatest minds in history have tried to find the secret of the Philosopher's Stone. When the Book of Aquarius appeared on an online forum in 2011, the anonymous author encouraged everyone to spread it online for free. He wrote, "The purpose of this book is to release one particular secret which has been kept hidden for the last 12,000 years. The Book of Aquarius contained easy-to-understand, step-by-step instructions for how to create the Philosopher's Stone, which, if created properly, would grant you eternal life." The author of the book said that all the old alchemy texts using confusing metaphors and symbolism was actually done intentionally. This was an early disinformation campaign, a way to keep the recipe secret, but still make it accessible to alchemists who knew how to decipher the text. The Book of Aquarius was posted to an online forum. It was ridiculed at first. There was no way you could achieve immortality with pee. But throughout history, alchemists actually used urine all the time. The 16th century Swiss alchemist Paracelsus claimed that life essence was in blood, in hair, sweat, and human waste. The Book of Aquarius says that the Philosopher's Stone is this life energy, concentrated and purified. This is the same energy you take in when you breathe, when you eat and drink. It's the energy that powers all forms of life, so it makes sense that it would be found in urine. Ancient alchemists knew this as well. Remember earlier I mentioned the secret society called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn? It had a lot of famous members: W.B. Yeats, Aleister Crowley, Arthur Conan Doyle, and a lot of other names that you'd recognize. Their name, Golden Dawn, is a reference to the only ingredient used to make the Philosopher's Stone. Golden as in the color, and dawn because that's the best time of day to get it.
You have got to be me.
Nope. But now with the Book of Aquarius hitting the web, all the secret symbolism and oaths of secrecy were useless. The Book of Aquarius gave specific step-by-step instructions on how to store, boil, distill, ferment, and purify urine. It would take months or even years, but eventually a stone would start to form. It was all in the book. How to do it, what the results should look like, what the process smells like.
Nobody really tried to make this crazy thing, did they?
They sure did. Shortly after the Book of Aquarius was published, the anonymous author set up a website at thebookofaquarius.com. There you could, of course, download a free copy of the book, but also participate in a forum where...
I've heard that too. I don't know if I would ever try it. Hey, if that's the only option, that's the only option. But, whew.
People would try to follow the instructions of the book as closely as possible and create their own Philosopher's Stone. And although the stone only required one ingredient...
Ginkgo.
Right. The process for extracting your life energy required patience. Even if you did everything correctly, it would take between 3 and 8 years to finish the work and make a stone. And that's assuming you kept your materials free from contamination, controlled the temperature, and used the correct equipment at the correct phase of production. A lot could go wrong. Yet a small but determined group of people were giving it their best shot. The recipe for creating the stone had 2 major parts. First, you had to repeatedly distill the urine and continually remove the densest particles. Next, you do it all again, but this time remove the lightest particles, which would be a form of salt. This first part would ideally take 3 months, but could often take up to a year. In the second part of the recipe, you combine the salt with the distilled urine and put it on a low and continuous heat. You do that for over a year until it putrefies and turns black. In the next part of the recipe...
Wait.
What?
Can you not call it a recipe, please? That makes it sound like you're supposed to eat it.
Well...
What? What?
When you're done with the process, you do eat it.
Ugh, I'm gonna be sick.
What's your problem? You're swimming in half the recipe right now.
It's not the same thing. I got bubbles. I got filters. Besides, I only tinkle in the back of the bowl.
I don't think it matters.
It matters.
Anyway, you keep heating the black stuff and eventually it turns white. And then you turn up the heat a little bit more and the stone turns red. And then you're pretty much ready to go. The book even gives you some guidance on how much you should...
I can't.
On the Book of Aquarius forums, a community of amateur alchemists emerged. Even the author of the book was an active member and would answer anyone who had a question. People were following the process, sharing tips and strategies. They would discuss how different foods affected their essence. They even posted pictures of their results. This went on for a few years, long enough for at least one person to succeed.
Did somebody actually get this crazy thing to work?
Well, nobody knows, because suddenly and without warning, the Book of Aquarius website was gone. We covered a lot today. The Egyptian god Thoth, Atlantis, the Emerald Tablet, Hermes Trismegistus, Apollonius of Tyana, the Book of Aquarius, and how they all connect to the Philosopher's Stone. And how much of the story is true? Well, a lot of it is, but let's look at the parts of the story that are questionable. First, the Emerald Tablet is indeed a text that's at least 1,200 years old. It is considered one of the most important documents in alchemy. Isaac Newton and others were fascinated with it and spent large parts of their life trying to decode it. But the Emerald Tablets, plural, that's a different story. All the stuff about Atlantis comes from the book The Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean by Dr. Maurice Doreal. And a lot of that information is part of Doreal's religion, the Brotherhood of the White Temple. The Brotherhood really does exist. It even has a lodge in Colorado. And Doreal has a lot of followers. You could find tons of articles and YouTube videos from people who believe that Doriel was chosen to deliver his message to the world.
It is a butt coming.
There is. Now look, maybe Doriel really did discover the tablets in Egypt and translate them. Maybe he really is helping people on their journey to the light of truth, as the Brotherhood claims.
Your tone is drifting into sarcasm territory.
But before you join this cult religion, there are a few things you should know about Dr. Maurice Doriel. Dr. Doriel's real name was Claude Doggins, and he wasn't a doctor of anything. He never graduated high school, which is amazing because he claimed that.
Now, this is where he starts to debunk or prove or whatever the story that he just went over.
He was able to read and write as soon as he was born and was doing advanced mathematics before the age of 1.
Yet no interest in getting a GED, eh?
Yeah, I guess not. So no record of him receiving a doctorate, but there is record of him driving a cab.
Hey, FM.
He drove a cab in Egypt?
Oh, he never went to Egypt.
Yeah, but
His passport verifies this. When he was confronted about the passport problem, Doriel, aka Doggins, said, well, they weren't physical travels, they were astral travels. Doggins wrote a lot about astral travels and other paranormal phenomena. He wrote about UFOs, alien attacks, the nuclear war that he predicted would happen in 1956. And he wrote about human serpent hybrids living in the Gobi Desert.
lizard people!
Yep.
Hey, did you know you could buy a lizard people mug from the Wi-Fi store? Use promo code...
No merch plugs now.
Sorry. Force a habit.
Now, his followers will say all the things that Doriel wrote were true. The problem is, his stories were lifted from prominent science fiction writers. For example, Doriel's Emerald Tablets book has passages that match almost word for word passages from the Necronomicon by H.P. Lovecraft.
Ooh, that was one of the campfire stories I would read at Camp Greenfoot.
Camp Greenfoot.
Oh yeah, I was a counselor there in the 80s. Kids loved me.
Lovecraft is kind of dark for kids, no?
I didn't think so at the time, but I'm not gonna lie. Some of those kids, they grew up pretty weird.
Anyway, Doriel also lifted ideas from the Shaver Mysteries, which were popular in the sci-fi pulp magazine Amazing Stories. He even wrote into the magazine. And Doriel made all kinds of other wild claims, as most cult leaders do, but there are too many to list here.
So he was a fraud?
Well, I'm not saying that, but his wife did.
What?
At a public event, his wife called him out for lying and cheating in front of a whole group of disciples.
Hell hath no fury, eh?
Yeah, the quote-unquote cult leader divorce made newspaper headlines at the time. Now, even with all this information, Doriel still has plenty of believers. And the Brotherhood still sells all of his books on their website. So the story of the original Emerald Tablet, that story is true. The actual tablet has never been found, but the text has been around for at least 1,200 years. That's confirmed. The Emerald Tablets by Doriel, well, you can make your own decision, but to me it sounds like yet another cult leader passing off science fiction as his own writing to take advantage of people for profit.
Yeah, nice work if you can get it.
Sure is. Look at G. You censored me.
Of course I did. Their lawyers watch this show, you moron.
Fair enough. So what about the Book of Aquarius? That one also sounds like science fiction, but turns out it's real. Ever since the Book of Aquarius website was taken down, there's not much information about what happened to the people who were trying to create their own stones. One theory is that some people were actually successful, so either they had the site taken down or...
The Illuminati.
Right, some group of shadowy elites didn't want this archive, buddy. Another theory is that the Book of Aquarius was a hoax. But if that's true, it's a hoax that took a lot of effort. The book is 165 pages, and the author goes into meticulous detail. And he quotes from 49 different alchemical texts, ranging from the 20th century all the way back to the 11th century. Many of these texts are pretty obscure and hard to find. And no one has ever come forward to take credit for writing it. The Book of Aquarius is probably not a hoax, but a book written by a passionate individual who honestly believes they're sharing the secret to creating a Philosopher's Stone.
With Tinkle?
Yep. There's actually a well-documented case of an alchemist attempting to create the Philosopher's Stone from urine. In 1669, German alchemist Hennig Brand dedicated years of his life to creating the stone. He was convinced urine was the way to do it, and he did everything that the Book of Aquarius says to do. Now, after boiling and distilling 1,500 gallons of his essence, he ended up with a white, waxy substance that actually glowed in the dark.
He made the stone?
No, he accidentally discovered phosphorus. Now, to a 17th century
Isn't that crazy?
alchemist, this must have been amazing. Here was a substance that was the product of the human body that was glowing with a life force. Now, Braun kept the recipe secret while he tried to create gold, but when he couldn't get that to work, he sold the recipe to another alchemist. As for living forever, well, it's been reported that Hennig Braun did die, but nobody knows exactly when. Now, of course, legend says that he faked his death and, like Nicholas Flamel, is still alive today. Now, that makes sense to me. If I created the Philosopher's Stone, I don't think I'd ever tell. Would you? Now, if you want to try creating it, the Book of Aquarius is still available online and linked below, but I don't recommend it. Boiling urine smells awful, but that's a small price to pay for immortality.
Wait. How do you know it smells awful?
Don't worry about that. Now, if you do decide to try and create the Philosopher's Stone, do me a favor. Email me in about 600 years, and we'll both have a good laugh.
No!
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name is AJ, there's Hecklefish, and this has been the Y-Files. If you had fun or learned anything, do us a favor and like, subscribe, comment, share. That stuff, really helpful.
Oh, they learned some things today.
I agree.
I think you owed them an apology, actually.
Oh, they're fine. Now, like most topics we cover on this channel, today's was recommended by you. And if there's a story that
One more. Okay, 1 second. Can you guys hear me? One more. This one is about the actual breakdown of Atlantis. It's called the Atlantis and Lemuria War. See that? No? 1 second. Okay, I think I have to back out because this is what happened last night and we lost the audio. So let me back out and come right back in, guys. Live streaming, but how do I? Okay, I got it. Tell me when you guys can see it.
years, the world has been captivated by the mystery of Atlantis. The concept of an ancient city hidden beneath the ocean is intriguing. But what if there was not just a city, but an entire continent buried beneath the waves? The continent of Lemuria is a huge landmass believed to have sunk in the Indian Ocean after some ancient catastrophic event. Atlantis and Lemuria are similar in that they've sparked numerous theories, legends, and interpretations. But Atlantis and Lemuria are very different in one way. There's no proof. This episode of the Y-Files is brought to you by PDS Debt.
Can you guys hear me now on while I just shared this new one? Hey, JD. Hey, FM. Can you guys hear me?
For thousands of years, the world has been captivated by the mystery of Atlantis. The concept of an ancient city hidden beneath the ocean is intriguing. But what if there was not just a city, but an entire continent buried beneath the waves? The continent of Lemuria is a huge landmass believed to have sunk in the Indian Ocean after some ancient catastrophic event. Atlantis and Lemuria are similar in that they've sparked numerous theories, legends, and interpretations. But Atlantis and Lemuria are very different in one way. There's no proof of Atlantis. No, don't put them anywhere. I didn't order 40 palm trees. I don't care where you put them, just don't leave them at my house. I can't hear you. What are you saying?
Hang on. Hey, Mary, close the door, would you? And tell the boys to take 5. Don't play the union card with me, Mary. You'll still get paid for the break. Sheesh, contractors, am I right?
Contractors? What are you working on?
Oh, this? We're working on a terrarium today.
Terrarium?
Yeah, it's a type of enclosure for plants and animals.
I know what a terrarium is. What does this have to do with me?
Well, the boys are working on the footings for the camel box and the terrarium. And I'm a little light on funds, so I need you to do a little teeny tiny, weeny baby teeny tiny money transfer so that I can pay the framers and order the sand.
Okay, I understand the words you're saying, but none of this makes any sense.
Oy vey, we are building out the base for the dune, which I have named the camel box, which is in the new terrarium. And I need to pay these guys and put in the order for the 35 cubic yards of sand.
35 cubic yards? How much sand is that?
About 50 tons, depending on the size of the grain. Look, can you do the transfer, please? I don't have time to educate you on sand dunes, and these guys are still on the clock. Besides, I don't need the Teamsters on my dorsal thing, you know what I'm talking about?
Again, I understood the words, but did you say 50 tons of sand?
Yeah, it might be a little less depending on the size of the oasis I put in, and what palapa I get.
Palapa?
Yeah, it's a type of beach.
Skip past this ad. You guys want me to skip past this part?
Hut.
I know what a palapa is. What is going on?
Well, I told you that Gertie was feeling homesick, and I wanted to do something to cheer her up, and you said that I could. So I'm building a terrarium in the backyard for her. It's going to have sand dunes and an oasis with a palapa. Excuse me. And an oasis with a beach hut.
Again, I don't know what
and
this...
I need you to float me a few shekels temporarily. Here we go.
In 1858, zoologist Philip Sclater made a name for himself in the scientific community. He
Thank you, JD.
divided the world into 6 geographic regions based on the distribution of animal species. They were Palearctic, Ethiopian, Indian, Australasian, Nearctic, and Neotropical. Sclater's system is still used today. While Sclater created his classification system, a mystery emerged: the fossils of lemurs. Lemur fossils were found in parts of South America, India, Africa, and Madagascar. These areas are not protected by land, but lemurs don't swim. The question haunted Sclater: how did lemurs spread across the world? Identical species don't develop in different places at once. He had a radical answer: that there was a landmass once connecting these areas. It would need to be massive, bigger than Australia. His theory was a stretch, but it would solve the mysteries he'd stumbled upon. Along with the unexplainable locations of lemurs, Sclater also uncovered extreme similarities between monkeys found in South America and Africa. In 1864, Sclater published an essay about his theory in a scientific journal. In the essay, he refers to his proposed continent as Lemuria.
Anterior to the existence of Africa in its present shape, a large continent occupied parts of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, stretching out towards what is now America to the west and to India on the east. In Madagascar and the Mascarene Islands, we have existing relics of this great continent, for which, as the original focus of the Stirps Lemurum, I should propose the name Lemuria.
This land bridge concept was popular in the scientific community at the time. Sir Charles Lyell, a well-known geologist and teacher, believed continents were rising above and sinking below the ocean routinely, just very gradually. So it's no surprise that following the publication of Philip Sclater's essay, the Lemuria theory really caught on. It turned out Lemuria may have been the answer to many scientific mysteries. In fact, Lemuria may have been the birthplace of humanity itself. In 1864, Philip Sclater introduced the concept of Lemuria to the world. 24 years later, Helena Blavatsky, a Russian theosophist and co-founder of the Theosophical Society, published a book titled The Secret Doctrine. Theosophists, like Blavatsky, are truth seekers who study a combination of religion, science, and philosophy. They believe in an ancient wisdom that unites all major religions. The Secret Doctrine discusses the origins of humanity. It outlines a sequence of 7 root races representing different stages of human development. Currently, we are in the 5th stage, with the 6th and 7th yet to come. According to the Secret Doctrine and other writings by Blavatsky's followers, the first root race was ethereal and didn't possess physical bodies. They may have appeared as giant phantoms. The second root race was shapeless and asexual.
Asexual?
Well, they didn't engage in sexual activity.
Sounds like they were married.
They reproduced through a
Sounds like they were married.
process called budding, which is essentially natural cloning. The third root race thrived in Lemuria and coexisted with dinosaurs. According to theosophist W. Scott Elliott, these Lemurians were giants.
His stature was gigantic, somewhere between 12 and 15 feet. His skin was of a yellowish-brown color. He had a strangely flattened face, eyes small but piercing, and set curiously far apart, so that he could see sideways as well as in front. The head sloped backwards and upwards in a rather curious way. The arms and legs, especially the former, were longer in proportion than ours.
Early in the Lemurian period, these supposed human ancestors laid eggs, but over millions of years, their reproductive process developed into, well, the one that we know today.
That process has gotten me in a lot of trouble over the years.
Well, maybe you shouldn't have engaged in the process as much as you did.
Yeah, what can I tell you? The ladies love me.
But Blavatsky and her followers weren't the only people who wrote about the Lemurians. A few years later, British writer James Churchward started writing about the sunken continent of Mu. At first, Mu was thought to be the inspiration for Plato's story of Atlantis, but Churchward connected it to Lemuria, and now many consider these lost continents one and the same. James Churchward's work is based on the translations of ancient Indian tablets. These texts are included in a series of books called The Children of Mu. The tablets describe an ancient civilization of 60 million people that was eventually destroyed. According to Churchward and others like archaeologist Augustus Le Plongeon, the sunken continent of Mu once stretched from Hawaii in the north to Easter Island in the east and almost reached Japan in the west. The Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan is believed to be the underwater ruins of this lost civilization. Nan Madol in Micronesia is considered the southern part of Mu. The site contains structures made of large volcanic rock logs. It's unknown who built them or how, but the society was advanced.
Isn't it wild that we have absolutely no idea how they were building structures back then, but history class all across the world will tell us that we were banging rocks together and just scavenging the world, doing absolutely nothing with our time. It's that they don't connect.
Recent LiDAR imaging revealed an artificial irrigation system that provided fresh water to residents throughout the area. They even had a sewer system years before the ancient Greeks or other advanced civilizations. Easter Island marks the eastern point of Mu. Take a look at Easter Island. It's a small island in the middle of nowhere, yet it was once home to 12.
It's crazy because if the stories weren't real, the fact that they're finding things and structures in the places that these stories from thousands and thousands of years ago are claiming, it kind of puts things in perspective for you that something, at least some of the story has to be real. Maybe not all of it, but some of the story has to be real.
1,000 people. How did they get there? Mainstream science says they traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean in canoes. But if the continent of Mu existed, they could have just walked there. This could also explain the similarities between Polynesian languages and Greek, as well as the worship of a sun god named Ra on Easter Island, which is similar to the Egyptian sun god Ra. These similarities of language and religion suggest that these cultures either intermingled or originated from a common source. James Churchward, Le Plongeon, Helena Blavatsky, they all describe Lemuria and Mu differently. But there's one thing they all agree on. It was destroyed in a terrible cataclysm. Chan Thomas, in his book, The Adam and Eve Story, presents compelling evidence that global disasters occur in a cycle. Lemuria might have been destroyed during one.
Exactly. New. Christopher Columbus did not. Yeah. That's a whole nother history lesson there.
One of these events. According to James Bramwell and William Scott Elliott, supporters of this theory, Lemuria was destroyed 11,500 years ago in a global disaster. And evidence of a global cataclysm can be found all over the earth, from the pyramids of Giza, across Africa, and even on East.
Just think of the concept of dinosaurs, right? Like, dinosaurs, if we did not find the fossils and the proof that they existed, absolutely no one would believe that they existed. There's not a person on this planet who would be like, yeah, there was dinosaurs roaming the earth. It's just the fact that we can prove it is the only reason that it is believable.
Easter Island. Now, of course, I'm referring to the Great Flood mentioned in the myths of every culture on Earth. The flood that occurred during a period of history called the Younger Dryas. As the last ice age drew to a close, the massive ice sheets that had covered much of the northern hemisphere began to rapidly melt away. Great torrents of fresh water poured into the oceans, causing sea levels to rise dramatically across the globe.
Hey, maybe instead of the Younger Dryas, it should be called the Younger Wet-Ass. What?
Coastal areas were transformed by the flood as shorelines expanded inland by hundreds of miles. Entire land masses were submerged beneath the rising seas. The lives of every human on Earth were disrupted by the Great Flood. Entire cultures that had been tied to the old shorelines were shattered and scattered. But a few resourceful people survived and rebuilt their civilization. But this time they did it.
That's true. Dinosaurs, I believe, were just found. What is it? Is it like the last 100 years, JD? Do you know when the first fossil was found?
In secret and hidden far away from any future global catastrophe. But what caused the ice sheets to melt in the first place? There's disagreement about this. Some think it was the impact of a massive comet or asteroid. Others think it was a solar event so destructive that plasma from the sun stripped away the Earth's magnetic field, exposing the planet to extreme heat and radiation, or a pole shift, which would also create a worldwide disaster. But there is one legend of Lemuria that contains a different explanation, that the Great Flood wasn't caused by an asteroid or the sun. It's said that the Great Flood was caused by people. According to Blavatsky, Lemuria was destroyed by fire. Volcanic eruptions shattered the continent into islands. Slowly, the islands sank into the sea, along with Lemurian history. James Churchward's version of the sinking of Mu is more dramatic and immediate. The civilization was obliterated in a single night of terror. Intense earthquakes shook the land. Volcanic eruptions spewed fire and ash. Relentless tsunamis engulfed the entire continent. It was a catastrophic event. In one night, everything was gone. There are even speculations that the Lemurians were eradicated by a pole shift, a sudden and civilization-ending event. Churchward's depiction resembles this cataclysmic shift. Volcanoes erupting around the world simultaneously, massive waves flooding everything, an entire civilization wiped away in an afternoon. Others propose something even more chilling. The destruction of Lemuria was not natural at all. They believe it was intentional. There is a 10,000-year-old story, which appears in books like the Chronicles of Akakor, which says the lost continents of Lemuria and Atlantis sank due to a nuclear war caused by the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are deities of the ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. And some consider the Anunnaki an alien race who created humans through...
That's a really good point. 95% of everything that's ever lived is extinct. That's pretty crazy. Good point. 1824. So just think about that. 1824 was the first time dinosaurs were discovered by human.
DNA manipulation, then used humans as slaves.
Facts.
A full Anunnaki episode is coming up.
Oh, how you tease.
The Chronicles of Akakor tells the story of two hostile...
Yeah, that's true, Newt. Like once you go down to a certain depth, that's why that submarine they sent down there, it just exploded. Because once you get down to a certain depth, which is why we cannot explore our own oceans, you would just I forget what the terminology is, but your body just collapses. Same thing. That's why we don't have any fish, or those fish with the little angler fish with the little lights hanging on them. That's kind of weird to think that there's an actual fish that has created it freaking flashlight hanging off its head, but we can't bring any of that up from the ocean because it will explode into pieces. And you can Google all of this stuff. It's all available. They just don't readily teach it.
Divine races that eventually went to war.
The four corners of the earth were red. The two races of gods started to dispute.
And that's not to say that everything that is in these episodes is true, but I'm just touching on the true aspects that are within the episode.
In J.J. Benitez's book, The Visitors, he recounts the alien abduction of a scientist, Daniel W. Fry, on July 4th, 1959. While Fry was on the alien vessel, they told him that they were the descendants of a race who lived on the land of Mu. They said there was another advanced civilization on Earth that we call the Atlanteans. Edgar Cayce also received telepathic messages about Atlantis. He described their culture and their technology.
In our great city, we harness the Firestone's energy through...
Have you ever seen some of that stuff down there? If they think aliens are up in the sky, have you ever seen what is in the ocean? Looks like straight up something from a dang coloring book.
advanced mechanics. Our domed power station concentrated the stone's rays via prisms. This energy propelled our crafts through induction, similar to your remote radio control. Though invisible, the rays powered vehicles through the air on land and sea. Carefully aligned, the stone's forces regenerated human bodies and fueled industries.
Cayce predicted that Atlantis would eventually be discovered.
The position as the continent Atlantis occupied is that as between the Gulf of Mexico on the one hand and the Mediterranean upon the other. Evidences of this lost civilization are to be found in the Pyrenees and Morocco on the one hand, British Honduras, Yucatan and America upon the other, the British West Indies or the Bahamas, and a portion of same that may be seen in the present, if the geological survey would be made in some of these, especially or notably in Bimini and in the Gulf Stream through this vicinity. These may be even yet determined.
Now keep in mind that it was 1939 when Edgar Cayce predicted that Atlanta would be discovered in Bimini in the Bahamas. The Bimini Road wasn't discovered until 1968.
Another cool thing is that, like, if you just look at a normal map, like that pretty much any map you can pick up in a store, they have Africa being very small. Meanwhile, it is humongous. It is huge. And the maps that they print for us, they intentionally make Africa look small so that we think small of Africa. And another thing too is there are no such thing as poor countries. All these countries that are labeled poor or third world, we go to their country and we take all of their natural resources and minerals to make phones and technology, and then we call them poor because we don't pay them for it. That's it.
According to Cayce and others, Atlanteans lived peacefully on Earth for over 200,000 years. But then the Anunnaki started to influence and corrupt the leaders of Atlantis. The corrupted Atlanteans, known as the Sons of Belial, initiated a conflict with Lemuria. About 25,000 years ago, Atlantis and Lemuria disagreed on how to rule the Earth. Atlantis wanted to dominate all tribes and civilizations worldwide. But the Lemurians wanted the Earth's civilizations to develop on their own. So they ordered Atlantis to leave them alone. Atlantis refused.
That's what this episode is actually about. This is about the technical sinking of Atlantis. But I honestly have no idea. I'm kind of like just getting into the research of it. Once they found that Rick structure in Africa, that kind of blew my mind because there's no way that structure is man-made. And even if it was man-made, we're talking this would have been made so long ago. And there's just no way we were doing that back then in the way that they're describing it. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of it, but a lot of it, you can Google it. Just pull up your little tab beside you and just Google Atlantis or the Rick structure in Africa.
Lemuria insisted. Atlantis chose war. The beginning of the war was the year 10,468 BC. In his writing, Plato mentions 9500 BC as the year that Atlantis was destroyed. An ancient historian named Hemus reports a terrible catastrophe that occurred in 11,000 BC. But how were these civilizations destroyed? Well, the Atlanteans had extremely advanced technology and weapons.
Their technologies and weapons were beyond what we know today. Flying crafts powered by fire crystals traversed the skies. Great energy beams harvested from the earth itself fueled weapons that could level mountains.
Lemuria was not as well armed and could not avoid war.
They burned the world with solar heat and tried to draw energy from each other. Rivers have been changed, and the height of the mountains and the strength of the sun have changed. There have been continents that have been flooded.
In the end, more than 60 million Lemurians died. The survivors took refuge in Agartha and later attacked Atlantis. The Earth became unstable as a result of nuclear explosions, and because of that, the Earth's axis changed and the poles shifted. All that remained of Atlantis are ancient structures like Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids. The civilization of Atlantis.
Look at those stone structures, and like, for example, the pyramids. Like, these things are, it's hard to fathom if you haven't really seen it, like I said earlier, but these are thousands and thousands and thousands of ton stones that are precisely put into place. And there's like a hair fracture between them. And we can't, have you ever seen how they have to move large columns and stuff today? It takes massive trucks and police escorts and a whole bunch of technology, math, amongst a slew of other SHIT to get it to where it needs to be. And they're expecting us to believe that the pyramids and stuff were just built by slaves by them rolling thousand ton stone through the desert. And another thing too is, if you were to build the pyramids, why would you build it on top of sand? And how did you build it on top of sand?
Atlantis did not survive the conflict, but about 10,000 Lemurians did survive, and they rebuilt their civilization. But this time they did it in secret. And that civilization exists today, thriving, under a mountain in California. Mount Shasta in Northern California has become synonymous with the unknown. Many who venture close to the mountain report strange events, glowing orbs, unexplained voices, and a tangible sense of another presence. Mount Shasta is also considered a vortex, a place where the boundary between dimensions is thin. Native American tribes speak of its sacred power, a spot where the spirit world is accessible. Then there are the geological mysteries. Why does Shasta have such a complex structure and so many different kinds of rock? Why do some plants grow there that are found nowhere else? Where did those plants come from? Well, legend has it that some Lemurians survived the cataclysm. The survivors traveled to North America and brought with them plants and animals and technology. They then built a city underneath Mount Shasta. They called this city Telos, the City of Light, and eyewitnesses have described the city in detail.
As you approach the hidden entrance to Telos, an energy pulsates through the ground.
That is true, JD. And not only that, we're talking about precision, and they want us to believe that they carved this by banging stones together. You go out and make a statue the size of your house by banging stones together, and tell me how perfect that is going to look. And not only that, on the inside, it is like a maze and a structure that you can go through, and there's rooms and tunnels built inside. And it's still standing, and they're still finding, they're still going through these structures and finding things today. It is phenomenal.
There is a deep humming sound and a vibration that you can feel all over your body.
Once inside, you are enveloped by a soft light.
There's also tons of underground cities. And this is not something that is like, oh, this is a conspiracy. You can just Google it, pull up a sidebar, Google underground cities. There are literal cities that people have lived in underground years and years and years ago, built into mountains even.
That emanates from the walls of the city. Telos is carved into 5 expansive levels,
As above, so below.
each one a labyrinth of corridors, chambers, and gardens.
The inhabitants of Telos are 7 feet tall and draped in flowing white robes. Despite their large size, they move slowly and gracefully. They are the Lemurians, the guardians of their ancient, lost civilization. Their technology is integrated with their natural surroundings, just as it did in Lemuria before the fall.
In Telos, they use crystal technology, large crystalline structure. This episode of the Y-Files is brought to you by PDS Debt. At first, Mu was thought to be
and set curiously
was eventually destroyed on Earth. The flood that occurred during a period of history called the Younger Dryas. As the
Sorry, guys, just hit
The destruction of Lemuria was not natural at all. They believe it was intentional. There is a 10,000-year-old story, which appears in books like the Chronicles of Akakor, which says the lost continents of Lemuria and Atlantis sank due to a nuclear war caused by the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are deities, pyramids. The civilization of Atlantis did not survive the conflict, but about 10,000 Lemurians did survive, and they rebuilt their civilization, but this time they did it in secret. And that civilization exists today, thriving, under a mountain in California. Mount Shasta in Northern California has become synonymous with the unknown. Many who venture close to the mountain report strange events, glowing orbs, unexplained voices, and a tangible sense of another presence. Mount Shasta is also considered a vortex, a place where the boundary between dimensions is thin. Native American tribes speak of its sacred.
Very good point, JD. I will do that for sure. Thank you. Oh, you just Googled it? Yeah, I'm telling you guys, if you have not Googled underground cities, they are everywhere, all around the world. And there's huge cities built into like mountains. This is not something that is a conspiracy. There is cities underground everywhere. Check it out.
Sacred power, a spot where the spirit world is accessible. Then there are the geological mysteries. Why does Shasta have such a complex structure and so many different kinds of rock? Why do some plants grow there that are found nowhere else? Where did those plants come from? Well, legend has it that some Lemurians survived the cataclysm. The survivors traveled to North America and brought with them plants and animals and technology. They then built a city underneath Mount Shasta. They called this city Telos, the city of light, and eyewitnesses described the city in detail.
As you approach the hidden entrance to Telos, an energy pulsates through the ground. There is a deep humming sound and a vibration that you feel all over your body.
Once inside, you are enveloped by a soft light that emanates from the walls of the city. Telos is carved into 5 expansive levels, each one a labyrinth of corridors, chambers, and gardens.
The inhabitants of Telos.
The reason you've never heard of it is very intentional, because just imagine if we were in school, for one, how intriguing it is, but imagine learning about this stuff instead of Christopher Columbus, for example. Like, imagine learning that the real history, not his story, history.
Are 7 feet tall and draped in flowing white robes. Despite their large...
Again, not all of this stuff is part of that, but I'm talking about specifically about the underground cities.
Size, they move slowly and gracefully. They are the Lemurians, the guardians of their ancient, lost civilization. Their technology is integrated with their natural surroundings, just as it did in Lemuria before the fall.
In Telos, they use crystal technology. Large crystalline structures serve various functions. They have healing chambers that resonate with frequencies that restore the body and the soul. They have crystal communication devices that allow mental connection across the entire planet.
Transportation within the city is achieved through levitating platforms that glide along magnetic lines.
Yeah, that's correct. And they also have an area of China that has over 200 mini pyramid structures. So I forget the exact area, but I'm sure we'll go over it on another night. But they have over 200 pyramid structures in this area, and they've all been right now, like, they do gardening and stuff on them. So they've overgrown with grass and stuff, but Just Google it, guys. This stuff is all available to us. They just do not inform you of it on their own.
Guided by thought alone.
At the center of Telos is the Temple of the Heart. Here, a large crystal pulses with a heartbeat, a rhythm synchronized with the natural resonance of the earth.
Residents of Mount Shasta claim to have seen tall beings wearing white robes walking at the fountain. Hikers have even followed the beings into caves. But when the hikers finally get inside the cave, it's empty, though some say you can still hear and feel the humming vibration. One eyewitness actually made the news in the early 20th century. In 1904, J.C. Brown, a British prospector, was hired by a mining company to search for gold deposits in Northern California. While investigating around Mount Shasta, he noticed an odd-looking piece of rock that didn't match the surrounding area. As he began clearing the debris and vegetation surrounding the rock, he found an entrance to a cavern system that led deep into Mount Shasta. Brown walked about 3 miles into the interior of the mountain through an array of crisscrossing tunnel systems when he began stumbling across pieces of gold. After the 11th mile, he reached a location that resembled a village. Inside the village, he came across chambers filled with gold and copper tablets. He found statues and spears and weapons, and he found skeletons. The average heights of these skeletons were around 6 foot 6 inches tall, and the tallest being...
Yeah, dude, that's true. Nikola Tesla, this is a little bit off topic, but Nikola Tesla, they called him crazy. He couldn't get funding for his projects. But today, they're using all of his information. Everything he's researched, that man died poor and with nothing, to now have a vehicle on the market, a Tesla named after him and his work, and he's still not getting credit for it. But they're using his name as a FU right in your face, as they do with everything else. Everything they do is right in our face.
10 feet in height. Over the next few days, he took pages and pages of notes. He memorized everything that he could. And when he left, he covered the entrance so that no one else would find it. And Brown spent the next 30 years researching and trying to build a group of experts to embark on an expedition. He finally gained a following of about 80 people willing to join the expedition, including a museum curator and several scientists. He spent 6 weeks planning out the entire trip, and several individuals sold off their properties, believing that they would soon become rich. Brown was worried someone would sneak into the city in advance, so he withheld a lot of the specifics regarding the location of the cavern system. He met with the team one last time to make final preparations and established a time and place of departure, June 19th at 1 p.m. The day finally arrived, and J.C. Brown didn't show. And he was never heard from again.
Yeah, that's true. And they also, Tesla, didn't he create like an engine that could be ran strictly off of water? Don't they have that information and controls already? But the reason they don't use it is monetary reasons, because obviously if we all could just go fill our car up with water, there wouldn't be a need for gas and oil, which is all funded and ran for money purposes. The fact that we could have free energy and electricity, but we're like the fact that Canada is selling electricity to the United States and sending millions of barrels to the United States a week of energy.
But the story of Lemuria is not only told in the West. The Tamil people indigenous to South India have a story of a lost continent that dates back to ancient times. The name Kumari Kandam was applied to this sunken land. The legend tells of an early Tamil dynasty known as the Pandyan kings. They ruled over the now submerged Kumari Kandam continent before it was swallowed by the rising seas at the end of the last ice age.
Younger wet ass.
Dryas.
Whatever.
Younger with that.
According to stories, Kumari Kandam was once located in the Indian Ocean between India and Madagascar. This large continent was the cradle of civilization.
Look at that. Look at that. That is built inside of a mountain, and look at the carvings on the building. And it's still standing today.
Home to the first people. The Pandyan kings ruled the entire continent from their capital city before successive floods submerged Kumari Kandam around 10,000 years ago. Is this just a Tamil legend, or is this actual history? Well, floods at the end of the last ice age, we have proof of that. But a lost continent in the Indian Ocean between Madagascar and India? That's so specific. There's no way there's proof of that, is there?
Is there? Is there?
There is. Imagine an ancient tropical land. Lush jungles stretch as far as the eye can see. Dinosaurs graze on treetops high above the forest floor, while early mammals stalk the dark ground below. This was Mauritia, a lost world forgotten beneath the waves. In 2013, scientists announced that they may have found traces of this vanished continent deep under the Indian Ocean. It had sunk below the sea millions of years ago when the continents were still joined as one supercontinent. Back then, South America and Africa hadn't split apart. India was attached to Madagascar, and Mauritia was squeezed
You mean you're researching while watching, Manny?
in between. Mauritia was discovered by accident. Geologists studying rocks on the island of Mauritius, east of Madagascar, were confused. They found minerals too ancient to belong to such a young volcanic island. As they followed the clues, they found traces of a much older landmass. A huge mass of buried continental crust stretched across the Indian Ocean, a lost continent matching ancient minerals. The researchers named it Mauritia after the island that led to its discovery. But the location of Mauritia is exactly where some legends say Lemuria was. The details of the continent are still a mystery, with more questions than answers. Was it really an intact continent, or just a jumbled mass of islands? And what creatures might have lived on this island? And could some of those creatures have been the very early ancestors of the Lemurians? There is no hard evidence to support the existence of Lemuria or Atlantis. Everything we know about these civilizations comes from stories. And many of those stories come from unreliable sources like Madame Blavatsky, James Churchward, and Edgar Cayce. Daniel Fry, who claimed to have been abducted by aliens, probably wasn't. He failed a polygraph. He kept changing his story, and he lied about his scientific credentials. He also got caught hoaxing UFO photographs. So without evidence, places like Lemuria, the Land of Mu, and Atlantis remain nothing but myths. But the accidental discovery of Mauritia shows that some ancient legends may be based in truth. The discovery of the continent of Mauritia happened completely by accident. Bimini Road was discovered by accident. So was the Yanaguni Monument. The city of Dwarka is described in ancient Indian texts as a magnificent city that was a symbol of prosperity. It was described as an advanced, well-planned city with beautiful gardens and temples and palaces. But according to Hindu legend, thousands of years ago, the seas began.
Yeah, Trump is a master. Like, that man, we won't get into politics here at all, but he is masterful and he understands psychology. He understands human beings. He understands how to make you easily forget all the stuff he's done because he does so much of it at one time.
And to rise. And eventually Dwarka disappeared into the ocean and was lost forever. And for 1,000 years, the story of the city of Dwarka was thought to be symbolic. But in the 1980s, the ancient city was found and is estimated to be around 10,000 years old.
Okay, so they found this city and it's estimated to be 10,000 years old. That means that we were already able to build and map out with math and science how to actually build these structures. So the fact that they want us to believe that so let alone they started 10,000 years ago, it takes a long time to develop knowledge. It's not something that just develops overnight. So if this was 10,000 years ago, that means we were well advanced 10,000 years ago.
Maybe older. In 2001, an underwater discovery was made off the coast of Cuba. Structures were found that at first were thought to be natural formations, but a submersible robot was sent to the site and found what's been described as an entire city. And what makes this find so extraordinary is that it's about 2,000 feet down. Scientists have said it could take 50,000 years for a city to sink that far. Now, even if it's not that old, there are blocks down there that are thought to be at least 6,000 years old, but nobody can say for sure. All of these discoveries were made by accident. And as long as people keep exploring the sea, there's a chance that Atlantis and Lemuria might eventually be found. And if we actually excavate the sites off India and Japan in the east, and Cuba and the Bahamas in the west, we may realize that Atlantis and Lemuria have already been found. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. My name is AJ. That's Hecklefish.
Hey, what's buzzing, sexy cousin?
This has been the Y-Files. If you had fun or learned anything, do Hecklefish a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, share. I know it's annoying to hear us ask that, but it really does help the channel. And like the topics we cover in the Y-Files, today's was recommended by you. So if there's a story you'd like to see or learn more about, go to theyfiles.com/tips. And if you need more Y-Files in your life, because who doesn't, check out the Y-Files Discord. There are thousands of people on there 24/7, and they're all just a little bit strange, like we are. A special thanks to our patrons who make all this possible. I dedicate every episode to...
I agree too. Thank you. I watch a lot of his stuff. I've been watching it for 2 years, but being able to have a conversation and a communication during it is great. That's why I'm going to take JD's advice and watch the new episode live also, because we'll be learning together and creating that chat. And again, not all of this stuff is all based off fact, but the stuff that you can look up in Google should be mind-blowing, because when I was first finding out about it, it's just like, why aren't they teaching us this, you know?
You, and I could not do this without your generosity. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider becoming a member on Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can keep the Y-Files going. And you also get access to some cool perks like early access to videos with no commercials, early access to fun products like the Talking Hecklefish plushie, and other stuff. Or if you'd rather get stuff, check out the Y-Files store.
Grab yourself a Hecklefish t-shirt or one of these Hecklefish Fistable coffee mug, fish coffee mugs, or Hecklefish talking plushie, talking doll, fish toy, doll, plush toy.
That's going to do it. Until next time, be safe, be kind, and know that you are appreciated.
I feel the crap I got stuck inside Mel's hole with MK Ultra. I've been only too aware. Did Stanley Kubrick fake the moon landing alone on a film set, or were the shadow people there? The Roswell aliens just fought the smiling man, I'm told, and his name was Cold. And I can't believe I'm dancing with the fish. Hecklefish on Thursday nights with AJ2, and when I'm never all through the night. All I ever wanted was to just hear the truth. So
yes, I've seen those too, and I also follow all of those channels on what's it called, on YouTube. Sorry, I'm getting tired. And there's actual people who are taking what are they called, tours out to Egypt, and they're showing everybody all of these areas and structures, and they're showing them how impossible it is to move this stone and how impossible it is to create these structures and these perfectly symmetrical statues. We're talking perfection. Also, look up the British Museum. The British Museum has, in Britain, has so much of Egypt's natural artwork stolen, of course. Check out the British Museum. That will tell you a lot right there.
The Mothman sightings and the solar storm still.
Oh yeah, the Vatican. That's something we could sit here for a whole 24-hour live and watch about the Vatican. You know what I don't like is that, okay, well, I can get into that subject forever, the Vatican. I won't even touch on that right now. I'll go down a whole rabbit hole tonight.
Come to Agatha, the secret city underground. Mysterious number stations, planets Circle 2, Project Stargate, and what the Dark Watchers found. Within a simulation, don't you worry though. The Black Knight satellite told me so. I can't believe I'm dancing with the fish. Headfish on Thursday nights, Wednesday J2, and Wi-Fi's on me on through the night. All I ever want was to just hear the truth, so the Wi-Fi's on me all through the night. Headfish on Thursday nights, Wednesday J2, and Wi-Fi's